Okay, true story. A young man comes from a nice family, gets a great education, gets a wonderful job with the government, a position of real responsibility. He's had in his past, he had some ambition, but really he just wants to live a virtuous life and use his knowledge, to benefit society. And, he has a wife and kids, ultimately, very happy family, loving family. He's prosperous and he's well respected by his community. But then he gets unjustly accused of a crime. And ultimately he's sent away to a different city and put in prison and then eventually executed. That man was Ancius Manlius Severinus Boethius. The year was 524, 524, and the book is The Consolation of Philosophy. Boethius sets out to write this book in prison. He is imprisoned in the year 523-ish by the Ostrogothic king Theodoric for treason. He's in his cell trying to make sense of it all through poetry when in his cell Lady Philosophy appears to him to console him in his hour of need. She lets him know he has known the answers to these issues all along. He just was not applying the philosophy that he knew in order to work through what has happened to him. I read this edition translated by David Slavitts and published by Harvard University Press in 2008. And when I was getting ready for this chat, I noticed on the back here that Steve Donahue did a review of this book, and I'm thinking this might be BookTube's own Steve Donahue. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I wanted to read this because a few months ago I read A Confederacy of Dunces, one of my favorite novels of all time, and the main character in A Confederacy of Dunces uses this book, The Consolation of Philosophy, is basically his Bible, words that he just chooses to live by, and then ultimately the book itself becomes a prop in one of the funniest scenes of the novel. But I've been meaning to read this for a really long time, so reading that book a couple of months ago really put it back on my radar, so I'm so glad to have gotten this read. So, there's a lot of information here, so I was kind of wondering what would be the best way to present the book. It's a relatively small little book, but what a little gem of civilization this is. So there's a lot of time we could spend on this, but to keep this chat to my normal sort of time frame, I thought I would just pull out a few things from the book that I really, sort of engaged with, really made me think more, and that I found, basically, the coolest parts of the book. So I thought I would start out with talking about fortune and Fortuna. So Boethius is, of course, he's very upset with fortune. He thinks his fortune has changed, that fortune has shifted on him. And Lady Philosophy comes down and she reminds him, fortune always changes. So fortune didn't change. Fortune didn't do anything different than it always does. And you know this, right? So she's telling you, that fortune changes. So, things like money, power, these types of things, they never bring lasting happiness because they can be taken away from you really, really quickly, which is a hard lesson to learn, but it happens all the time. So, there's this point here about greed that I thought was real cool that I thought I would just read real quick. Philosophy says, should plenty ever pour out riches abundant as sands on a beach that the waves pile up, or the stars in the clear night sky without stinting? Men would not cease their endless complaining and pleading always for more. If God were prodigal, showering gold in answer to every prayer, and heaping honors on every head, they would not be content. Never mind grateful. They'd take it for granted. Greed opens new maws. So when a person puts their happiness in something like greed or power, then she's saying here that you're never a source of happiness, because once you have it, you're looking for the next thing. And so she's reminding Boethius of this fact. And then this idea of, Boethius has been unjustly accused. And so he's really confused by this. How could this happen? Why would people do this to him? basically she said. He's asking philosophy. Philosophy tells him, it's hardly a surprise then that we should be beset by the iniquitous, whom it is our purpose in life to displease and confound. It's our purpose to displease. It's our purpose to displease and confound, evildoers, right? She's saying, and even though there are many of them, we can still despise them because they have no principles to lead them and are motivated only by ignorance and whim that lead them now one way and now another. Sometimes they come against us with great strength, but wisdom, our general, withdraws her forces into our stronghold, while our enemies wear themselves out, plundering our useless baggage trains. From our ramparts we look down and laugh at them as they busy themselves carrying away their pointless, cumbersome trophies. We are protected, after all, by the strength of our citadel from stupidity's disorganized forays. So our citadel is our own being. So, we are in our own being. We have our own integrity. And so the iniquitous around us, it's our job to show them, to just confound them at every turn. So it shouldn't surprise us then if we get caught up sometimes in some of their actions. But she's saying, they can come against us with a lot of strength, but the things they take away, they can take away a lot of things from us, but they cannot take away ourselves. They cannot take away our being. I mean, granted, they can also kill you, which is ultimately what happens to Boethius, but you can't take away a person's inner self. So you can't take away that inner core from a person. And that's what philosophy is trying to show Boethius. And that's really what she tries to show him throughout this whole book in different ways. So she talks about happiness, and happiness being really the greatest good, but happiness is a thing that's also transient. And so many people chase false aspects of happiness, just aspects of it, not happiness itself with a capital H, but aspects of happiness. This would be things like a good job, or money, or position, or regard, community regard, or even your family and things like that. Your children. These are things they cause you happiness, yes, but they're not happiness. They're not the source of all happiness, because all of those things, including your family, can be taken from you, and then you would no longer have happiness. So when you're happy, if you've lost everything and you still have that sort of happiness for you, happiness to be you, to be who you are, brings you happiness, then you have found, basically true happiness. And so she also talks about how all beings search for the good. The ultimate good is happiness. Happiness is one of the ultimate goods. But, even evil people search for the good. They're actually looking for the good. The problem is that they don't know what good is. And so they're looking at something like greed as good. Greed is good. Greed is not good. And so greed is not something that's permanent, money and wealth. So if that's what you're chasing to be your happiness and to be your greatest good, then ultimately, you're going to not lead a good life. You're actually going to be in error, and so you're going to be causing probably evil in the world as opposed to good, even though you're searching for good, because you're thinking. Evil people usually think that whatever it is they're searching for, or whatever they're fighting for or grasping for, is good. It's gonna cause them an ultimate happiness, but it won't. So another thing I wanted to talk about here is fate versus providence, and chance versus free will, because all these concepts are talked about in the book, which I thought was really cool, because I loved thinking about this. Like chance, I put it in order like chance, free will, fate, providence. So chance is things that seem to happen by random, although philosophy reminds us that nothing really happens at random. I mean, the water flowing in a river seems random, the little drops of water, but really they're all being pushed along, and so things are happening because of other causes. So there's really not a chance per se, completely random, but it feels like random chance to us a lot of times, right? And then there's free will, so that's like the choice we make around whatever it is. So that's a choice. But then once we make a choice, we sort of set a path. So for the foreseeable future, it sets us in a direction. So if we've got one little thread, we got multiple threads. If we have for chance, and then we make a decision, something happens to us by chance. We make a decision on how to respond to that. Until we make that decision, we have lots of threads going into different fates. But once we make a decision about the fate, about that chance, then that particular chord into fate is set. And so then things will proceed along a certain way, right? And then providence is the ultimate all collection of fates. So chance, free will, then there's fate, and there's multiple fates, and then the sum total of all fate of all time would be providence, sort of the unified whole. So the way that I thought about this is like, let's think about like I'm sitting on the couch watching a movie with a friend, and then we start talking about, should we go next door and get some ice cream to the store next door? We're arguing about that. One of us says yes, one of us says no. Ultimately, we decide to do that. But we could have decided not to do it. Deciding to go get ice cream is free will. So when we're in free will, when we're there, I meet a person there that I didn't expect to see, that I haven't seen in a really long time, but seeing her makes me remember something. It makes me remember that, oh yeah, I heard about a job that, I vaguely remembered, I thought maybe you might be interested in that, Ultimately, she takes that information, it changes, that was a chance meeting for her, but then once she makes the decision to apply for the job and then gets the job, her fate is, she leaves her current job, so a certain fate is set out for her then from that point. I hope that makes sense. And then providence would be the ultimate end game of everything. It would be the sum total of all. All right. Before I run out of time, I just wanted to, and I hope that made sense about fate. I find it fascinating to think about fate and free will, and so it's talked about quite a bit in this book. But before I run out of time, I just wanted to read this last sort of passage from philosophy that I thought was really, really kind of cool. It's Boethius talking about philosophy's his experience, and he says, "She finished singing, and the melody hung in the air, its sweetness still in my ears, which were eager for more. I waited a bit and then thanked her. What wonderful comfort you offer with both your arguments and your poetry. You do revive me, so that I am no longer absolutely devastated by the blows of fortune, but seem at least for the moment able to bear them. At any rate, I am no longer terrified by the prospect of your strong remedies." So he's saying here, she finishes singing and he feels better. She has consoled him, and he's not afraid to undertake the strong remedies. She's told him basically, get a hold of yourself, and he needs to come to grips with what's happened to him, and so he accepts to do that. The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius, such a wonderful read this was. My next book chat is going to be whichever of these two books I finish first. It possibly is going to be Dune, Messiah by Frank Herbert, or it might be Our Lady of the Flowers by Jean Genet. I'm not really sure. Right now it's looking like Dune, Messiah will be finished first, but I will get a chat on whichever one I finish first, coming up fairly soon. So until then, take care. Bye.